Hello everyone, and welcome to this video series on the Cubase Logical Editors Explained. Now, I find that this is a feature that many Cubase users don't really dive deep into and explore how beneficial this feature is. Basically, to sum it up in the most simplest form, in the logical editors, you can batch process a whole bunch of functions and actions and filters and apply it in one simple click. So you can have all these actions and all filters set up, and all you have to do is run the presets or the setup that you've done, and it'll process a whole bunch of different actions and events that you've set up. So I think of it as a way to speed up your workflow and improve your productions in Cubase. And in this video series, we're going to take you through how to get into these editors and how to start using them. First off, I just want to explain the difference between the two logical editors. You've got one called the Project Logical Editor and then another called the Logical Editor. Now, this can sound confusing, but let's just put it this way. The Project Logical Editor deals with things that you're doing in your project, like your tracks and other things like that that pertain to the project, where the Logical Editor deals with MIDI. So instead of getting things a bit confused, let's rather name the Logical Editor the MIDI Logical Editor. Now let's talk about how you get to each of them. So to get to the Project Logical Editor, you go to the Project menu and then down to Project Logical Editor. And here you can apply a preset that has been saved in that Logical Editor, or you can set up your own. So in this setup option here, you will see all the presets and see how they've been built up, and you can create your own. Now, if you want to get to the MIDI Logical Editor, you need to go to the MIDI menu, then down to Logical Editor. But this is great out here because you actually need to select a MIDI event before going into the Logical Editor. So if I select this event over here, then go to MIDI and then Logical Editor, you can see that now I can get to the setup and the apply preset. Just to show you the difference, if I hit apply preset, it's going to bring up all the presets and I can select which one I want to apply. So I can take this preset, I'm going to double the tempo and hit apply, and you can see that that MIDI data changes over there. I'm going to undo that, and this time if I go to MIDI and then Logical Editor and Setup, over here it brings up the setup. I can also see the presets here, so I can click double tempo, and here it's going to show me the event target filters, so the filters that are set up here, and then what action is going to be applied, and then I can apply it. And as you can see, it's done the same thing there. So that's the difference between the Project Logical Editor, which is in the Project menu, and then the Logical Editor, or now what we're going to be calling the MIDI Logical Editor, under the MIDI menu. So now that you know the difference between the two and what each does, let's dive in and take a look at some of the presets and how they work. Now, before getting into the presets, I just want to talk about exactly what's happening with a preset. So for example, I'm going to select a preset. I'm going to go to the project menu, then down to Project Logical Editor and apply a preset. Now this brings up the preset menu. Starting off at the top here, you've got your user presets. So these are any presets that I've saved myself. And then you've got the factory presets. Now under the factory presets, these are divided up into different categories. For example, you've got things that deal with automation, things that deal with mixing and naming of data and tracks within your project. But I want to go down to the visibility one over here, and there's this preset here, hide all. So if I select that and apply it, it's going to basically do exactly what it said. It's going to hide all the tracks. I can reveal them again by just clicking over here and saying show all tracks. But the problem with just applying a preset is you're not seeing exactly what's happening. But if I go to the Project Logical Editor again, and then down to Setup, over here, I can select that function again. So it's got the same layout. You've got your user presets, you've got your factory presets. And if I scroll down to visibility and click on hide all, now it's going to show me exactly what's happening. So with the logical editors, it's broken down into the event target filters and then the event transform actions. Now, this might sound a bit confusing, but basically what it's doing is you're setting up some criteria here. And if the project meets the criteria, for example, if a track falls within this criteria over here, then the action is going to be enabled and it's going to apply it. So we're going to go through in great detail on what you do here and how you set up the filters and set the conditions and parameters. But I'm just going to have a quick little run through over here just to show you what's happening. So under the filter here, you can select a bunch of different categories, but this is set to container. So any type of container that is equal to a track. So it's saying when it's looking in this project, anything that is equal to a track, then it also uses some Boolean operations. So you can say if it's equal to a track or if it's a folder track as well. I could also change it to and, so and or. So if it's track or it's a folder track, then what's going to happen is the track operation is going to hide the track. So that's pretty much what it is. You're taking a condition, you're saying if this condition is met, then this action is being applied. That's it in its most basic form. So if I click apply, it does the same thing. Now, a good thing just to understand is just getting your head into the sort of Boolean operations and how they work, because you can set up quite a chain of events saying, for example, if it's a track, but if it's not a folder track, then it gets hidden. So you can just set up all these different criteria. Say, for example, I could click unequal. And if I just reveal this, so let's just show all the tracks again, and I want to create a folder track. So let me show you how this would work. So I'm going to create a folder track. Let's just go to project and add folder. Let's just call it empty folder because there's going to be nothing in it. So I've got this folder track. Now what we're saying is if a container is a track, it's going to be hidden. But if it is not equal to a folder track, it's not going to get hidden. So it's quite important just to understand the Boolean operation and see the sequence of events and see if it equals that. So I'm saying if a track is equal to, it's going to be hidden. If it's not equal to a folder track, it's not going to be hidden. So if I click apply over here, you can see that it's hid all my other tracks, but it's kept the folder. So that's what's important, is to understand the sort of cycle of events that's happening, the criteria that's been set up, and what operations have been set up, like the Boolean operations of the and or, and how that's going to be applied using the event transform actions. Now let's just jump through a set of presets, and while we're jumping through them, we're going to go into here and see how these filters and actions are occurring. So now that you got an idea how the filters and actions and the Boolean operations work, let's take a look now at how some of the presets work and how we can apply them to our tracks in our project. So we're talking about the project logical editor. So to get to that, you need to go to project, then down to project logical editor, and then apply preset. Then this brings up the apply logic project editor dialog box where we can search for a preset and then apply it. Now I don't want to navigate to this menu each time, so I do want to set a shortcut or key command for this so I can open it more easily. So I'm just going to close this. I'm going to go to the edit menu, then down to key commands. And then on the search function over here, I'm just going to type apply project. That's a search for it. There we go. Apply project logical editor. Now let's set a preset for this. For this, I'm going to use Control Command P on my Mac and assign that. There we go. Now I just need to hit that and it brings it up. So starting off with the presets, you've got your user presets. As you can see, I've made one user preset. I am going to get to user presets later in the series, but for now, let's not worry about this. Let's just close this and then go to factory presets. Now, with the factory presets, these are organized into subfolders over here. As you can see, you've got automation, editors, mixing, naming, and so on. So there's a whole bunch of presets that have been added into each of these relating to what action you want to apply. So for example, if you want to quantize some of your parts, or maybe you want to change something with the template track or so on, then you've got these folders that you can navigate to. I'm not going to go through all of these. I just want to go through a few of them and show you how the presets work and how it can help you. For this example, let's take a look at some of the mixing ones. So I'm going to open up mixing and I've got a whole bunch of options here. I've got toggle EQ bypass on selected tracks. So for example, let's say you scroll through to your tracks. So I've got my drums over here. If I go to the EQs, I haven't got an EQ set up here. So let's just dial in something. I'm just going to dial in something quickly there. That's something very quick. If I go to my bass folder here, I've got an EQ set up on the bass. On the synths, I've got some EQs as well. Now, if I wanted to bypass these EQs, I'd have to go into each instrument and then bypass them and activate them. So these have just got that and just clicking on them. Now that can be quite a tedious task if I just want to bypass all the EQs applied to the track and hear what things sound like before. But this option over here makes it very easy. So let's select toggle EQ bypass for selected tracks. And then what you need to do is select the tracks and then you can bypass the EQs. So for example, I've got my drums over here. I'm going to hold down Command and select my bass and then these synth tracks. So I've selected those tracks. Then I click on toggle EQ bypassed of selected tracks. I click apply. And as you can see, that's bypassed the EQ on these tracks. So that's the drums, that's bypassed. The bass is bypassed, and then these synths. Now, it says toggle, meaning each time I apply that, it's either going to toggle it on or off. So I'm just going to select those tracks again and hit apply, and there we go. We've got our EQs on again. Now, what if you want to toggle your inserts and sends off? Well, you can do the same there. So I'm going to jump across to my low pane over here, and if I switch over here, now here are all my inserts that I've applied on my tracks. Not many, but if I wanted to go and bypass all of them, I'd have to go in and click on each of them. Now, to make life a lot easier, what we can do is just select all the tracks. So I'm just going to select all those tracks there. So I've got them all selected. Let's include that last one there. So all the tracks are selected, and then toggle insert bypass of selected tracks. Now watch this. Bypass the tracks. Toggle again, and we've got them back again. The same with the sends. I can click over here. I've got some sends set up. I can go down to toggle sends bypass of selected tracks and apply that. And as easy as done in just a click. So as you can see, there's definitely workflow improvements by using these presets. Now let's take a look at some others. So I'm just going to close that low pane and just expand this up again and deselect those tracks. What I want to look is at naming. So under naming, you've got some options here. So add date to selected MIDI or audio tracks. So maybe I want to date my tracks. For example, these MIDI drum tracks over here. I can select them, select that, and there we go. It's added a date. Maybe for categorizing of tracks, you want to date them as you create them. This is a nice little feature just to make sure that you can see when your tracks were created. I'll undo that. You can also add other things, like there's a preset here to add some extra text to the selected tracks. If I apply that, it's going to add hi to the end of the selected track. It's going to append hi to the end of the tracks. And you could go into this preset and basically change that text to whatever you want to add to your tracks. So that's just a starting point. So you can use the presets as a starting point to go in and edit it and create your own preset. Next, let's check some options that we have under tracks. So you've got some options where if you select a track, you can do specific things to it. For example, let's say I mute my bass and my synths, and I decide I don't need them in my project. Then over here, you've got this option that says delete muted tracks. So if you've got a huge project of maybe 100 tracks, and you've muted 20 of them and you don't need them anymore, you can just select this option, click apply, and it removes those tracks from your project. I'll hit undo to bring those tracks back. Then you've also got another option, which I pretty much like, is sometimes I go into some tracks and I disable them because I don't need them, but then I want to enable them again later. So for example, if I take the bass and these synths, I right click on them and I say disable selected tracks. So those tracks are disabled. If I had to go back and later decide to enable them again, I'd need to select them again and enable them. Or I could just simply use this option over here, enable all disabled tracks. That's going to look at my project and it's going to just take any tracks that are disabled and enable them again. So as you're getting an idea here, it's allowing you to take the option of using an action and applying it, and it'll apply to multiple tracks in your project instead of you having to go back and make those changes on a single track level or selecting all the tracks and applying the action. Now, one last thing I want to look at is the visibility. I'm a big fan of this visibility option over here. So if you take a look here, I've created folders and I've taken my tracks and moved them into these folders. Now, if I want to collapse or expand these folders, I have to go into each one and click on it to collapse or expand it. Now, an easy option is to either collapse or expand these using the options over here. So if I scroll over here, I've got open all visible folders. If I click on that, it's going to open all my folders. If I click on collapse, it's going to collapse them. Now, I can make my life even easier by assigning this to a key command and applying that key command to instantly apply it. So to do this, I just need to go to the edit menu, then to key commands, and I can search for that option. So that's collapse, and I can see I've got collapse all visible folders, and that's under the process project logical editor over here. So let's assign a shortcut for this. I'm going to use the shortcut Control Option C. That isn't assigned to anything, so I'm going to assign that. And then let's say open folder. Let's see if it searches for that. No, what is that option? Just to make sure that we've got that option, open all visible folders. So that's open all, there we go, open all visible folders. And for this, I'm going to assign the shortcut Control Command E. That isn't assigned to anything. And there we go. So now we've got a project logical editor preset that we've assigned to a key command. And now we can just quickly apply them. So I can just use my key commands that I've set up to open them and then collapse them. So really, you can just assign them to whatever you want. But I find by assigning them to those shortcut keys, it makes my life a lot easier. And it's applying a filter and action to something that would require multiple clicks to get to the same step. So that's just having a quick look at some of the presets. Now, in the next video, let's reverse engineer some of these presets so you get an idea of how they're compiled and built up within the project logical editor. So now to understand these presets a bit better, let's take some of the presets and open them up in the project logical editor setup window and reverse engineer them and see how the filters and actions are working. Now to get to the project logical editor setup window, we go under project, then to project logical editor, and then to setup. But I don't want to do this every time. So like you saw with the apply preset, let's set a key command to this so we can quickly open this. So I'm going to go to the edit menu, then down to key commands. Now I want to search for open project logical. And this is what we're looking for, open project logical editor. And for this, I'm going to assign a key command. I'm going to use Control-Shift-P and assign that. So now I just have to hit that and I'll open up the setup window. Now, what I want to go through is some of the mixing presets. So I'll go to factory presets and then mixing. And for this, let's first take a look at the toggle inserts bypass of selected tracks. So taking a look at the operations over here, what we first got is we've got some brackets over here that is containing the target or the filter target that we want to use. But before getting that, let's go over some of the settings here. So under the filter target, we're choosing a container type. You can see if you click on each one, all the different types of items you can select. But what we're doing is selecting a container type. The container type is equal to, so the condition is equal. You can choose some other options over here. And the container type is equal to a track. Then we're using the Boolean operation of AND. So what we're saying is the container type is equal to a track, and if the property is set to selected. So meaning if the track is selected, then it's going to apply the action. And that is all contained within the brackets. So basically anything that's contained within the brackets is going to happen before any other filters that we've set up here. Then in the actions, if a track is selected and it's equal to a track, then basically it's going to be bypassed and this is going to be toggled. So the track operation, you can see you've got some options here, but we're saying the track operation of the insert bypass is toggled. So that's what we've got. So let's take an example here. I'm going to open up the lower pane so we can see our inserts, and I've got the drum track selected. So if I hit apply, it's going to bypass that. So the operation is if a track is selected. So if I select some other tracks, let's just minimize that and let's select the bass and then the synths. So I've got these synths selected and hit apply. And that's just toggling between the two. Now I just want to show you something. Now let's say the property is not set and I'm just going to choose is selected. So if the property is not selected, then watch here. I'm going to unselect the track. Let me just maybe go for drums here, or maybe the kick drum. So something that doesn't have insert effects on. Now watch here, as I click apply, now that's bypassing all the insert effects. So simply what I did there was change the property from is set to not set, meaning that it's not looking at tracks that's selected. Basically what it's doing there is looking to container types that are equal to a track that are not selected are going to be toggled and bypassed, or toggled and enabled again. So that's just giving you an example on how you can take some things, switch them around and change them up. Because the way I like to look at it is that these presets are starting points for logical editor presets that you can edit and save as your own presets. So for example, I want to be able to bypass all my effects in one simple click. And that's how you do it, by taking the property is set and changing it to property is not set. And then when we apply it, it's basically bypassing all those insert effects. And the same goes for the send effects section. So if we go there, you can see if I jump to the sends and select a track and apply it, it's bypassing just that track. And if I set the property to not set and change this back to selected, if I hit apply, it's bypassing all those reverb sends. So this is basically the same setup. You've got your brackets, and within the brackets, you've got a container type that's equal to a track and is not selected. Then it's going to bypass the sends on that track and toggle between the two as you hit apply. So that's an example of some of the mixing presets. Now let's take a look at some of the visibility ones, because I really like these visibility ones. And in particular, I want to look at the open all and collapse all visible folders. So if I hit open all, let's take a look at what's happening over here. But before doing that, let's just minimize slow pane. So as you can see, we've got some folders, and within the folders are some tracks going through all the different tracks over here. So let's take a look at this. So again, we've got some brackets, and within those brackets is a container type. So the container type is equal to a folder track. So if we have a folder track, so we've got a property, it's not set, and it's saying if that folder track is hidden, then under the track operation for the action target, the operation is a folder and the parameter is open. So what that means is the folder is going to take the operation of opening. So let's just minimize these folders over here and test this out. So we're looking at folders, and if it's a folder track and it's hidden, it's going to be opened. And voila, there you go. And it's the same for the collapse all visible folders. Everything is the same here. We've got a container type equal to a folder track with a Boolean operation of and. If the property is not set and it is hidden, you can see you can select different things there, like is muted, is selected, is empty, is hidden. We're going for is hidden. Then the track operation for that folder is it's going to close the folder. So take a look here as we apply that. Now, another important thing to note is that the perform actions, you've got some options here, and this is set to transform. So it's going to transform the filters with the action. You've got some other options here like delete, select, deselect. These are just some different types of actions that you can use depending on the action that you want to perform. Like maybe, for example, I want to choose all my folder tracks and I want to choose to delete them. Then it's deleted my folders. But that's not what I want to do here. But I'm just showing you there how you can apply different actions for the events that are happening. So I hope that gives you a little idea of taking a preset and backwards engineering it. What I think you should really do from your side is you must go through some of these presets, choose one that you like, and just reverse engineer the process that's happening within the event target filters and the action. For example, if I just had to go back to mixing and choose something else like toggle EQ bypass of selected tracks, you can see we've got a similar operation over here. So it's saying the container is equal to a track. The property is set to a track that is selected. The Boolean operation is and it's including both of these filters. Then under the action, it's saying the track operation of the EQ bypass. You can see each time you just click here, you can choose something. So these are the parameters or operations that you can set, and it's toggling it. So the more that you backwards engineer the presets that you choose, the more you're going to understand how this logical editor works. So now that you've got an understanding on how the project logical editor works, Next, let's move over to the MIDI logical editor and take a look at some of these presets and their functions and actions. So now in this video, we're going to move over onto the MIDI logical editor and start taking a look at some of the presets that we have. Now to get into this editor, remember that I first said you need to select a MIDI event, then you can go to the MIDI menu, then down to the logical project editor, and then apply preset. But like you saw with the project logical editor, I don't want to jump for this function over here under this menu every time. So I'm going to set a key command for this. So I'll go down to key commands, and then what I want to look for is apply logical. There we go, apply logical preset. And for this, I'm going to use the key command Control Command L. So now I just need to press Command Control L to open up the preset menu over there. Now what you got here is the factory presets, and then here are the different categories. As you can see, it covers everything from all event types, control change, copy and extract, delete, and so on. So let's take a look through some of these and see how they work. Starting off, I did show you the all event types with the double tempo and half tempo. Now this is really handy if you want to take an event and you want to speed up the timing. For example, this event, let's say I want to double the tempo, I apply it, and as you see there, that has double timed that tempo. So before, this part was like this, and now if I double it, it's very handy if you just want to double time something. And likewise, you can use the half tempo to half the tempo. I'm going to halve it again, and there I've got a slow tempo. I'll double that to get it back to where it was. So simply just looking at the MIDI data and then taking this event and doubling or halving the tempo. You can see you can also shift the position of the MIDI notes by a frame or ticks. But for that, that's pretty self-explanatory. So let's move over onto some other things. For this, I'm going to move over to the delete category. And under this delete category, I personally like this thing over here where you can choose to delete specific notes within an event. So I'm just going to bring up the low pane so I can see this MIDI note data. So there we go. We got the MIDI note data. Just get it in shots over there. Now, if you take a look at these, let's look at this. Delete every fifth note. So maybe you want to just delete some of the notes within your MIDI note data, and instead of having to go into the editor here, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, take that, delete it, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. An easier thing is just to select all your note data, then go to delete every fifth note, and that just removes it for me. So that's very easy just to do if you just want to do something where you're editing the MIDI note data, and things like this do it much faster for you. You can see you've got some other short functions, for example, deleting minor sevenths of chords. So if you had a chord pattern where maybe it's got the seventh in it, you could remove those sevenths, and a bunch of other deleting functions that you can see here. So this just allows you to do actions that might be quite tedious within the editor. Next, let's move over onto copy and extract. And what you can do here is copy note data and extract it and move it to somewhere else. For example, I've got this pad over here. If I click to go into it, I can view my velocity. So here is my velocity note data for this pad part. Now I can select it all and choose to copy velocity to CC1, which is my modulation. So if I apply that and I move over to my modulation lane, you can see there are those points that match up with the velocity. So that's just a nice way how you can move or copy note data between different CC settings. Also, what's quite nice are these options here which relate to kick drums and snare drums. Basically, on a drum kit, the kick is normally always on C1 and the snare on D1. And what you can do is if you've got a MIDI performance, so for example, let's just take this drum part over here. I have converted my MIDI part to kicks and snares, but let me show you how I did this. So if you open up this MIDI part, this is my drums where it's got my kick, snare, and my hats. Now I can select this part, for example, taking all that note data, and I can say extract kick drum to C1 onto a new track. Now when I do that, it's extracted the kick drum from this MIDI event down to this track over here. So it's just relabeled it drums 01, but I could go in and name this kick, for example. So without the low pain MIDI editor open, let me just do it again, but now do it with the extract snare. So I'm going to select that event and say extract snare drum to D1 to a new track. So there you go. So it's created the second drum track over here, which is the snare. And if you just take a look, this is the kick on C1. And likewise, this is the snare on D1. So it's just a nice way of just distributing MIDI note data to new tracks if you want to point it on specific MIDI notes. And for example, if you had a specific hit that's not on C1 or D1, that's on another one, you can go into the setup of this preset and adjust that. Now let's move over onto musical context. Now, what's nice about this is you can just take your MIDI note data and convert it. For example, you can change things from minor to major or even add some sub bass. For example, if I go down to this pad part over here and just go into the MIDI note data, I've got it selected already. And if I change the major chords to minor chords and apply it, you can see how it's shifting those notes around. So it's just nice to take something maybe with a major tonality and then convert the major third to a flat third, giving you some minor chords. Moving on, let's check out note length. And with this has some nice presets over here to adjust or increase or randomize note lengths. For example, again, with this pad section over here, let's say I wanted to shorten these notes. I could go in here and say shorten length by 1 frame or 10 ticks. Let's maybe go for 10 ticks. And each time I apply that, you can see how it's shortening those notes. Or I can randomize the note length. So for example, if I take this and click here, maybe 8th to 10% and apply, it's just going to randomly change those notes. If you just take a look over there, these are just jumping around each time I hit apply preset. Next, moving over to note positioning and quantize. What you got here is functions and presets allow you to quantize, shift, and randomize note data. So for example, let's say I want to shift my notes around. I want to go to this drum part over here with my kick and snare. I just want to zoom up. So we've got our note data there, maybe just a bit more, just so we can see this very clearly. So let's say I want to shift every second note by 10 ticks. So just to add a bit of difference with these notes. So here's the second notes over here. So just watch over there and see how that's shifting those notes around. So what's quite nice about this is just to slightly maybe push the beats around or just shift things off, or you could even randomize the position by plus minus 10 ticks. So especially with drums, without things sounding too rigid and on the beat, you could, for example, use something like this to add some sort of humanization where you're slightly shifting things off. Next, what I'd like to look at is the notes transpose. For this, I'm going to go for the ARP synth again. I'm just going to open up this low pane. So what's nice about this is you can use it to transpose up or down your note data. I've got this option over here, transpose all notes before cursor 1 octave down. So if you take a look over here, my notes, if I hit apply, that's jumped it down. So if I'm taking a listen to just this synth, and now it's going to jump up. So that's just nice. You can take your MIDI note data. I find it works really well with ARP lines like this, where I just want to transpose up or transpose down. I just place my cursor and any note data before that is going to be transposed. Now, obviously, there's many other functions here, but you get the idea with allowing you to transpose the MIDI note data. Also, there's note velocity. Obviously, you can use this to change the velocity of your notes. For example, maybe I want to pick specific beats within the beats over here and shift them up and down. For example, maybe every offbeat, I want to go down minus 10% on offbeat 3 and 4. As you can see there, it's shifting those down. Maybe change it into something else, so 10% off beat 4, and you can just shift things like that. And finally, just going over to this category over here, select. What this allows you to do is select note data, and then you can do what you want with that. So, for example, going back into these hats over here, I've got all my MIDI note data for these hats. Now, let's say I find that this hat pattern is a bit too fast. So if I just solo the hats over here, now, let's say I find this hats pattern a bit busy. It's actually quite slow, but just use it as a demonstration. And I want to select every other note and then delete it. So what I've been able to do is quickly go in and delete note data instead of having to select each other note like this and going in and removing it. Instead, I can just use that preset to select them all and then delete them, and there they go. So what you're noticing is that basically with the logical presets allows you to take actions that may take you a few steps and apply it quickly in one easy step. So that is some of the presets that we dived in. Now, next up, let's go deeper in and see what the setup looks like on some of these presets. So you saw some of the presets and what they could do in the previous video with the MIDI logical editor, or shall I rather just say the MLE. Now, in this video, let's take a look at some of the setup of these so we can sort of reverse engineer and see what's happening. Like I mentioned to you, to get to this editor, you need to first select a MIDI event, then go to MIDI, and then down to the logical editor and click on setup. Now, I don't want to click on this every time, so I'm going to set up a key command for this. So I'm going to go to the edit menu, key commands, and for the search bar, I'm just going to type open logical, see what we find. There we go, that's what we're looking for, open logical editor, and I'm going to assign a key command. So for my project logical editor, to open it was Control-Shift-P, and now for this, for the logical editor, I'm going to use Control-Shift-L and assign that. So now I can just quickly and easily open that up. So starting off, let's jump to the top over here with all events and first start off with the double tempo. So like you saw, you've got this MIDI event here. Maybe I should just double click and open it and make it bigger so you can see what's happening. So we've got this MIDI event here. You can see the note data. And if I apply this, you see that it speeds up, giving you that double time. So let's see what's actually happening. So we've got some brackets, and within the brackets is enclosed two functions. And enclosed within the brackets are two filters. So the first filter is saying that the type is equal to a note, or the type is unequal to a note. So those are the filters that we're looking for. And what happens is if it meets this criteria, then the length is divided by, and a parameter is set here. And this parameter is set to 2. So it's basically taking the note. So here's the notes over here. So it's taking the length and it's dividing it by 2. The same with the position. Here is the action target for position. It's divided by 2 as well. So it's really just that simple. You'll see if you click on things, so under filter type, you can choose what the filter target is. So like we said, it's a type. We got equal or unequal to, and then with this, you got the action targets. We've got a selection of parameters that you can use. We said length and position, and here are the sort of maths that you could use for the operation. So we're using the divide by, and then we're setting the parameter. And as we apply it, you can see that it's applying it. And that's using the transform function. So it's transforming the original MIDI note data down to what's set up here in the event transform actions. And the opposite is true for the half tempo. So for half tempo, it's got the same criteria here in the target filters, but instead it's multiplying by 2. So that's a very simple one to start off. Now let's jump into some others and see what they do. So for this, I just want to close this lower pane editor here and just go for these drums, because next what I want to look at is if we go onto the copy and extract. Remember in the last video, I showed you how you could take your drums and extract the kick, which is C1, to a new track. Now, if we take a look at that, let's see what's happening over here. So we've got a type under the filter target, and if the type of the condition is equal to a note, you've got other options here, but we declaring that it's a note, and the Boolean operation is using and as well. So it's saying a note, and when the note's pitch is equal to C1. Now, if I click here, I can't see the options that were available over here. Basically, when you say pitch, you have to input note data. So I could say D2 or whatever, but I'm inputting the MIDI note data. So I'm saying C1, that's the note that I'm looking for. And when that note is equals the conditions that are set up, it's going to extract it to a track. So there's no actions that we've added here under the event transform actions. Basically, it's looking at those notes and then it jumps right to the bottom here and it extracts it to a track. So if I click apply, you can see what it does is it creates this new drum track here. And on this drum track is the kicks, and it's removed the kicks from or extracted the kick note data from this drum events over here. So that is the copy and extract. Next, let's take a look at something else. So I'm going to jump back to this ARP synth. I can open it up in the low pane editor. And for this, let's go to delete. And under the delete, I want to take a look at delete every fifth note. And this is quite a simple one. You've got a filter target here, but no event transform actions. So enclosed in the brackets, it's saying the target is a type, and this type needs to equal a note, and the last event, so every other event, so you've got some conditions that you can say. So you're saying every other event with the counter of 5. So basically that's saying when it reaches that fifth note, what does it want to do? And that's enclosed within the brackets. So I know this might sound a bit confusing, but as we start going through more and more of them, you're going to see how the language is used and the criteria. So let's just go back through that again. The type is equal to a note and the last event. So the last event, which is a counter of 5, meaning every 5 notes, nothing happens under the event transform action, but what does occur is it deletes them. So just taking a look over here. So as I hit apply, it just deletes every 5th note. So it's quite interesting. Some presets sound quite simple, but there's more steps and actions over here, where others that seem pretty complex have quite simple filters and actions. So just keep in mind on what is needed to be set up. Let's move on. What I want to go to now is under the musical context. We've got change major to minor chords. So for this, I'm just going to select a different MIDI event. I'm going to go for this pad again. So that is the pad. We've got some note data there, and we're going to go for the musical context. And I want to change a major chord to a minor chord. Now, let's take a look at this. This is a bit different. So for this, we've got the type is equal to a note. We've already seen that. And this is enclosed within the brackets. The Boolean operation is using AND. So there's another criteria that has to be met as well. And this is saying the context variable. Now, if you click here, you can see what other options you can use. So we've used a type, but the next thing that we're looking at is the context of the variable, and the variable is the chord. So what we're saying is the context variable is equal to the position in the chord, and the position in the chord, we're looking at part of the chord, and that part of the chord is the major third. You'll see there, as I just selected it, it just changed it to the root. So by default, if I say position in the chord, jumps it to root, and then you can actually just drag this around to see we're not seeing everything there. And I'm saying the parameter 2 of the position of the chord is the major third. Now that's all enclosed in the brackets, and we move to the action. And for the action, it's taking that value and it's subtracting 1. So basically what all of this is saying is it's taking the major third in a chord and it's flattening it to give a minor, and it's transforming it. So as we apply that, just take a look there. So there's my major, and I apply, and it shifts it down or flattens it to a minor third. So that's quite a nice one to look at. You're looking at something different there where it's a context variable, and then it's taking all those details that we set up in the parameters, it's making that a value, and it's subtracting the value from that position within the chord. Now, next up, I want to jump for a random length. So that is going to be under the note lengths. And for the note lengths, let's just go for, I wonder which one we should go for. Let's say random length to fourth plus minus 10%. Okay, so let's take a look here. I've got this chord progression over here, and I'm just going to maybe just move things around so we can see it a bit more clearly. That's fine. We're just seeing 3 chords. And what we're doing here, same thing. The type is equal to the condition of a note. That's all it really is there. And then that's saying the action target, what we're looking at in these notes or this note data, is the length. And for the length, we want to set a random value between. So you've got some options here. And this random value is a value that you set. So this is set at 432 and 528. So as I click apply, check that, changes it. I'll click apply again, and it's randomly changing it. But you can actually go in and change these details. So let's say, for example, I said 700 here and 800. Now if I apply, I've got a bit of a longer length. So let's go in over here. Let's say 1200 and to 1600 and apply. and that's increasing the length. Now, hopefully what this is giving you an idea of is that you can use these presets as starting points, and then you can go in and change the parameter values or tweak them so it suits what you want to transform and edit in the event that you're applying it to. Okay, so let's maybe just jump for one more option. I'm going to go to Notes Transpose. And what I want to look at is actually, let's just jump back to this art pattern over here. So we got that. Yep, that's pretty good. Maybe what I can do here is just add some random length to that. So what we're going to do is just 400 and 600. Let's see if this is too long. It might be. Just shorten it a bit. So 200 to 300. So we're just using the action that we just set up. Okay, that looks good. Now I want to go to the Notes Transpose. And what I want to look at is transpose all notes before cursor down 1 octave. So I'm going to place my cursor at bar 14. And if I click apply, it's taking all those notes before my cursor and dropping them an octave. Now this one's quite a funny one, so I definitely want to show you what this is. So I'm going to undo that, and we've got some brackets, and enclosed within those brackets, we're saying the type is equal to no data, and the position is going to be before the cursor, but we don't have anything set up in parameter 1 or parameter 2. Instead, we're using this bar range time base. Now, this is quite an interesting thing where you can actually go in and choose what parameter you want to change before the cursor and what type of sort of measurement it is. You've got seconds, samples, and frames, and you've got PPQ. Now, PPQ is the internal MIDI resolution. So it's looking at the resolution of the MIDI note data, and then that is going to be classified as a value, and it's going to subtract 12 steps. And there's 12 steps in an octave. So basically, by taking that position before the cursor, using the internal MIDI resolution, it's going to subtract 12 steps. So what I'm trying to show you here is when you first look at these things, they do look quite complex and a bit daunting. But as you work through them and you go step by step, so you're going from left to right, starting at the first sort of bar that's been put in here, then moving on into the next, depending on how the brackets and Boolean operations are set up, then you find out how those are going to be transformed. So I know those were quite a few and we quickly jumped through them, but I just wanted to show you how you can go through, reverse engineer these presets and get a better idea on how this logical editor works. As we go through this video series, you're going to see how all these different options that you've got here, how you can use them and incorporate them into your workflow. So let's move on and start creating some of our own. So now that you've explored some of the presets and reverse engineered some of them, next let's move over and I can show you how you can start creating your own presets. First, we're going to focus in on the project logical editor, and then we'll move over onto some MIDI ones. First off, I want to take a look at how we can create our own sort of visibility preset. So if you take a look here, I've got a project that contains quite a few tracks. There's about 30 of them, and I've taken similar types of tracks and then moved them into a folder. So I've tried to do this to sort of neaten things up and just hide the folders when I need to. But let's say I just want to focus in on one section and hide all the other types of tracks. Well, to do that, I'd need to go to the visibility. Let's say, for example, I just want to view these strings. Then I'd have to tick here to remove those tracks so that I can see just the strings. So it's a bit of a tedious thing, but I'll show you now how you can use the project logical editor to simplify that for you. So first off, you need to make sure that you've named your tracks correctly or named them the way that you want to. That's really key in the sort of whole organizational tool of using this and then applying or creating your own preset. So first off, I want to see just the strings section. I've taken these tracks over here and I've moved them into a strings folder, but I also want to add the name strings to the end of these tracks. So first off, I want to select these tracks and I just want to first go to the logical project editor. And I want to go first for a factory naming preset. So over here, I've got append har to selected tracks. But instead of har, I want to click over here and add strings and apply that. So as you can see now, it's added strings to all these tracks that I've got selected. Now let me show you how you can create your own preset. So I'm going to go up here and scroll to empty. Now, what I mentioned is I want to take the strings tracks or the strings that are in this project and hide all the other tracks. So let me show you how to set up a condition with some filters and some actions to do this. So I'm going to insert my first field over here. For the filter target, I'm going to select name. For the condition, I want it to contains not. Now, let me go to parameter 1 and type strings. So what I'm basically saying is if the name does not contain strings, then what I can do is I can hide it. So down in the actions, I'm going to insert a field there. For this, I'm going to go to track operation. For the operation, I want to select hide track. And then for the parameter, I don't want it enable, I want it to toggle. So that means each time I hit apply, it's going to toggle. So it'll hide them and then reveal them again. So just going through that preset quickly, I've got a name contains not strings is then going to hide that track. So watch over here. I'm going to apply that. So there we go. I've hidden all the tracks that I don't need, and I can just focus in on the strings tracks now. Or I can hit apply again, and it reveals them all. So that's a really nice, quick way to create a visibility preset. Now, how do you save this? So I'm going to go down over here, and I'm going to click this button, and I'm going to say Save Changes as Preset. Now, what this is going to do, this is going to go to my project logical editor for the factory presets. But I want to save to my user preset. So I just want to show you something quickly here. If I click this, I can choose to show where my user presets location is. So here is where my user presets is. It's under my Steinberg folder in my documents. Then I go to Cubase, user presets, and then project logical editor. And then over here, I can create a folder structure for what I want for my user presets. So over here, I'm going to create a folder and name it naming. Now going back over here to the logical editor, I'm going to go back and say save changes as presets, and then I'm going to navigate to that folder. So that's going to be into Documents, Steinberg, Cubase, User Presets, and then Project Logical Editor and Naming. And I'm going to name this Gary Strings, so I know that it's my preset. So there we go. I've saved my first preset. And if I scroll down, there is now the naming folder and the name of my preset. And I can do the same for another section. For example, let's say I want to do the same for guitars. So I've got all these guitars here and I want to hide all the other tracks, but just show the guitars. So I'm going to create a new empty folder and create the same condition, just change the parameter. So insert, name, contains not. But before we get there, did you see what I did wrong there? I haven't actually added or appended the name of guitar to these tracks. So just to make sure that it picks up the correct thing, let's go back to the factory presets and then naming, then to append. And let's say we want to append these selected tracks. So I'm going to select these tracks here and just append guitar. I could go and neaten up the naming, but just for now, let's just say that, or just say guitars. So that'll all contain guitars at the end of the tracks. There we go. Now let's go back to an empty preset, insert a field, add name, contains not, the parameter is guitars, and then insert the action, which is track operation, and hide track and toggle. Let's see if this works. And there we go. Just our guitars, all the other tracks. And let's save this. So save changes as preset. Navigate back to the user documents folder where you saw where that was under naming, and instead this one we're going to call guitars. So it's all dependent on how you name your tracks. But now watch this. I can apply that to reveal all my tracks. I can jump for the strings section, apply that, and I see just my strings. And even better, I could create a keyboard shortcut command for these and easily just hit that to toggle those presets and sort of reveal which tracks I want to focus in on my project. So there you go. That is how you can create your own preset from an empty folder and then set the target and the actions and then apply it. And I was using some visibility functionality. Now let's move over and see some other things. In this video, I want to focus more in on the naming on the Project Logical Editor and how you can use it in your workflow. I sort of touched on this in the previous video, but let's look at this in more detail. So, for example, I've got these violin tracks over here. I've sort of got a naming convention to them, but let's say I wanted to add the name strings into the beginning. So I could select all these tracks, then go to the naming subfolder. And in here, if we just go to append high to selected tracks. So what this is going to do is it's going to append, meaning at the end, it's going to add high to the name. But I want to add to the beginning. So I'm going to undo that. Under the operation, I'm going to select prepend. So that's going to add it before. And then I can change the name over here. So let's say strings with a dash and then a space. And now we've got strings right there in the track. So if I had to have gone and done that myself, I would have had to click on each track and then change that to strings. So you can see how that's quite a time saver there. Now, let's say you create a whole bunch of new audio tracks. For example, I'm going to go to the project menu, then add audio tracks. And I'm just going to say 10 tracks and just leave it at the default name. I'm just going to place my track at the beginning here. So we right at the beginning. So here and add tracks again, leave it as default name and just add in 10 audio tracks. So there I've got more audio tracks. And let's say I start working my project and I want to go in and relabel them. Maybe I'm working with some percussion here and I don't want to go into each track and name it. So what I could do is just select those tracks, then go to the naming folder again, down to rename and renumber. What you can see here is it's taking a container type, which is equal to a track, and a media type, which is equal to an audio track. So I've got audio tracks over there. We're going to rename these. And for this, it's going to take the name. It's going to generate a name. And the name is going to be what I add in over here under parameter 1, which is audio by default. And I'm going to call it percussion. And parameter 2 is set to 1, meaning anything after that is going to be numbered. So watch over here. So there you've got percussion 1, percussion 2, and so on. Things can really get messy when you start adding your tracks and you don't have a sort of naming convention. So basically, these naming Project Logical Editor presets can really help you add some organization and some clarity to your tracks within your project. Let's just take a look at a few more. So I'm just going to undo those audio tracks. And going back to naming, you can also prepend a name to tracks that are within a folder. So for example, with these strings, I'm just going to undo that. So I've got everything here. Instead, I could select the folder track, go there to prepend drums to all the names in the folder, but I don't want to use drums. So as you can see, it says a container type is equal to a track, and the property is set to the parent folder of the selected. So this is the parent folder that is selected. We're going to name it. We're going to prepend it. And what we want to prepend it with is strings. So let's just type strings there, space, and then it's going to use the standard names that follow in the rest. So as I click apply, there we go. Easy as done. So I just had to select the folder, and anything contained within the folder is going to get renamed with that prepend of strings. So that's just a very quick demonstration on how you can use these. It's just a great way of just organizing your tracks. And like you see here, you don't have to use what is available in the presets. You can open up the presets, use them as a starting point, and then change them so that it suits your workflow within the project that you're working in. So I think you should have a good understanding now on naming. Now let's move over and check out some other things in the Project Logical Editor. Now in this video, let me show you something else that's pretty helpful. So within this project over here, I've got a bunch of events that I've muted while I was working on the song and now I no longer need. So I've got quite a selection of tracks here. And if I had to sort of go in and remove them, I need to select each event, delete it, delete it, delete it, delete it, and so on. So it could be quite tedious. Now, let me show you how you can use a Project Logical Editor to help you simplify this whole process. Now, there is a preset already that does this. So I'm just going to undo those changes that I did, bring up the Project Logical Editor window, and over here under parts and events, there's this one here, delete all muted events and parts. So just keep an eye on my arrangement area here with the muted parts as I hit apply. Now that just removed all those parts for me in a matter of seconds. So I didn't have to go and select each part and remove it. Now the beauty obviously is in the series of commands here and how they sort of chain together. As you can see here, you've got a selection of different brackets and Boolean operations, and this just helps determine the conditions and make sure that they met. Now let me create a new empty project, and I'll show you how we build this thing up from scratch. So first off, we're going to create a new field over here, and this is going to be a field type. The field type is going to be equal to a MIDI track because we're saying all muted events. When I mean all, it means any MIDI or any audio tracks as well. Now, let's add some of the other components as well. We'll build it up, and then I'll show you where the brackets go and the different Boolean operations. And this MIDI container can be equal to a part, so it can be any part of a MIDI track. Then continuing on, I also want the media type to be equal to an audio track. And this audio track, the container type, can be either an event or a part. So container type is equal to an event or a part. Then lastly, we need to determine what's going to be happening. So what's going to be happening is the property. So the property of this whole condition that's being set up, the property is going to be set. And what's going to be happening is it's going to be muted. And then after that, the muted parts, I want to delete them. So that's sort of all the different filters that we need to create. But what we need to do now is determine the correct sequence of events by putting in the right brackets and the right Boolean operations. So starting off, I just want to close the brackets at the end over here. So we've got our first bracket that's closing everything. And going to the top, we're going to be determining what is contained within what. So first off, we've got a media type that's equal to a MIDI track, and that MIDI track needs to be a part. So that's all bundled together in one. So the media type is MIDI and a part. So we're going to close our brackets here because that's going to be contained within something. And then the next part is it can be MIDI or it can be an audio track. So we're going to go to or, and the media type is going to be also housed within a bracket. So this will be a bracket system over here. So the media type is equal to an audio track, and the container type can be an event or it can be a part. And then finally, we need to close the brackets. So we're having a double bracket system here. And then we're saying when all these conditions are met, the property is set to be muted. So going through here, we need to sort of backwards engineer everything and go to the top and determine our bracket system. So I'm going to go for the 3 brackets over here. So what you got is you've got a bracket contained within the media type and container. Then it's going to or, it's starting a new bracket. So this media type is going to be the audio, and it's going to contain the event or the part. Then we're closing the bracket with a double bracket system over there. And all of this whole property is going to be muted, and we're closing the brackets there. So this might be a bit complex, but you'll see if you just get into this, you'll understand how everything is bracketed together. You're just basically containing things within other things. And like I said, everything is going to be deleted, which is muted. So just going back, let me just mute some events. So I'm just going to select this, mute some random events here. You can see I've got those muted. And going back here, if I just apply this, it removes those muted events for me. So that was quite a complex one, but I just want to show you how complex you can get by chaining things together with different bracket systems and Boolean operations, and how you can take a sequence of events. For example, this I would have had to go in and select all the parts and then delete them, where you can just do it in one big sweep by using a Project Logical Editor preset or one that you built up. And when you apply it, it's just going to do all those actions for you in one go. And obviously what you can see here is the power of setting up your media types and then saying what those container types are within the media type. So that's giving you an idea on how you can do some selecting and deleting in your project logical editor by building up a sequence of filters and actions. In the last few videos, we've been focusing in on how to use some actions and filters within the project logical editor with some audio and MIDI tracks and events. Now, in this video, let's explore how we can use it with some automation. As you can see here, I've got a VCA track that's a volume control for my strings, and on it, I've written in some automation. But what if we want to use the project logical editor to help us select portions of the automation and edit them? In this video, I'm going to show you how we can decrease the volume of the automation within the cycle area. So let's open up the project logical editor. And for this, I want to go for an empty patch. Now, let's think about what we're going to do. So I'm going to create a field, and this is going to be a media type. And I want it to be equal to, we're not working with audio, we're not working with MIDI, but instead we're working with automation. So that's going to be the first field. Then we need to add a container type. So for this container type, I want this to be equal to an event. Because as you can see here, I've got some automation and it'll be happening on any event. Also, let's think about what we want to do with the position. So as you can see here, if I just scroll there, I want the position of the selection to be anywhere that is inside the cycle. So I'm going to go to position. So when I select position, it's giving me a condition to equal to, and I can set a specific bar reading, or I could go here and I've got a selection of choices. So you've got different things between the bar, inside the bar, outside the bar, before, after the cursor. But what I want to look at is inside the cycle area. So wherever I set up the cycle area, that is where it's going to be looking at. And it's using the PPQ, which is the internal MIDI resolution for that. Then finally, we need to set a property. So I'm going to go here and set the property. The property is going to be set. And basically what I want to do with this is this needs to look at the parent object that is selected. So for example, I might have an event here, but the parent object would be the track. And to finish everything off, let's just add our bracket system. So this is all contained within brackets. So the media type is automation, and the container type is equal to an event. Then the position is inside the cycle, and then the property is set to, let's just expand that out there. The parent object is selected. So we can see all that stuff there, and with the Boolean operations, they all AND. Now, what I want to do when these are all met is for the transform actions, this I want to decrease the level of this automation. So for this, I can use the trim functionality. And then for the trim functionality, I want to decrement the volume in dB. So this is the volume of the track, and it's going to decrement it. And the amount that it's going to decrement it by is 1 dB. So just take a look over here. So here's some automation that I've done. I've just written in the automation. There's a bit of a jump up here, and then it continues. Basically, I've set a cycle area, and when I apply this, that just reduced that automation. So it retains the shape that I built up, but I'm just using this to decrement it by a dB. So for example, I might be listening to it and I might just jump out a bit here. So if we listen back. That's just jumping up a bit. So I'm just going to reduce it and take a listen back. Yeah, it works great, and it was pretty simple to do. So I could set this to a shortcut command and just quickly apply this to any automation that's within a cycle that will pertain to the trimming of the volume on that automation lane. So that gives you a good understanding now on how to work with some audio events, audio tracks, MIDI parts, MIDI tracks, and even some automation types. I think we've covered quite a bit now with the Project Logical Editor. So in the next few videos, let's jump in now to the MIDI Logical Editor. So now in the following videos, we're going to start focusing in on how to use the MIDI Logical Editor and how to build up some presets that we can use. Now just remember, before we can get to the MIDI Logical Editor, you need to select a MIDI event. And now I'm going to use my shortcut to bring it up. So what I got here is a blank page. Just remove any of the fields so we can start from this blank slate over here. Now, what I want to do is I've got this hats pattern here. I'm just going to double click it. And what you can see here is the MIDI note data for the hats. I've got the open hats here on A sharp 1 and then the closed hats on G sharp 1. Now, I want to add some randomization to the velocities. So let me show you how to do that. So first off here, I'm going to insert a new field. Now what this is it's saying the type is equal to a note. That's perfectly fine because we want it to select a MIDI note. Then we're going to add a new field here under the actions. For this, I want to jump for value 2. So with value 2, it's going to add some randomization to the velocity. If I selected value 1, this would add randomization to the note pitch. So value 2, I want to set a relative random value between, and I can set the between with these parameters here, parameter 1 and parameter 2. So for example, let's make this minus 50. And this one, maybe minus 5. So that is going to be my parameter area. Now watch over here as I hit apply. That's added some randomization to my hats. So for example, if I just have to solo these hats, which is over here, and play back before, and now with the randomization. So there's some difference in the playing. I can jump back. And it's just got some different velocities there, giving a bit more of a human feel. I could go more drastic, for example, maybe minus 80 and apply it. And there we've got a more drastic setting. You can hear the changes there. Now, what I want to do is I want to make sure that the velocity is not changing on the open hats. So the velocity is only being randomized on the closed hats. Well, to do that, I can add another field over here. For this, I can give it the value of value 1, which is pitch. And this I'm going to say is unequal or not equal to, and I'm going to add the value of A sharp 1. So if I just zoom up here and just scroll across, you can see that we've got A sharp 1 and G sharp 1. I'm just going to go back here so we can scroll and see that. And now, if you just take a look here, so any note data, except for pitch values that are unequal to A sharp 1, is going to add the randomization. So let's see what happens when we apply that. You see that? I'm going to apply it again. So every time it's randomizing the other notes except for the A sharp 1. I could make this a bit less drastic by going here and saying maybe minus 15 to minus 5 and apply it. And each time I hit that, it's just going to randomize the velocity note data of the notes over here except for A sharp 1. So I find that particularly handy if I just want to retain the note velocity that I've recorded in or input in for specific notes, but randomize the rest. So that's how to do some randomization to some note velocity. Now next up, let's take a look at how we can edit some note lengths. So in the last video, you saw how we could edit and randomize the note velocity on a MIDI event. Now in this video, let's take a look at how we can edit and randomize the note length and the position. For this, I'm going to use this op synth events over here. If I just double click it here, it's going to reveal the MIDI note data so we can see that in the lower pane. Now I'm going to open up the MIDI logical editor. And for this, I just want to remove the conditions that we've set up here and create some new ones. So I'm just going to remove these and this one over here. So starting off, let's add another field again. And for this, it's going to be the type is equal to a note. That's perfectly fine. That's what we're going for. Now I want to add another field. But before doing that, just taking a listen to this synth parts over here. What I don't want to do is I don't want to add any randomization to the root notes of these chords over here. So this includes F2, which are these notes over here, and then these notes as well over here, which is A sharp 2. So going over here, I'm going to add another field. I want to say pitch, which is value 1, and I want to say unequal. So unequal to F2. So I don't want that note to be included within the target filter that I've set up. And as well is value 1 is going to be pitch and say unequal to. And for this, I want to add a sharp 2. And I just want to close some brackets over here. So that's going to be all contained within the brackets. So what we're saying here is if a type is equal to a note and it doesn't include F2 and it doesn't include A sharp 2, then that is when the transform actions are going to kick in. And for the transform actions, I'm going to insert over here, we're going to have length. So I'm going to insert length. And with length, I want to set random values between, and I can add parameters over here. So I'm just going to say 100 and 300. Let's just say those are the parameters. And what I just need to make sure is that I've got that event selected. So I've got the ARP selected and I hit apply. And can you see what happens there? So that has randomly adjusted the lengths of any pitch note data, which excludes F2 and A sharp 2. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm just going to zoom in closer. So here we go. Let's just move this up here. We got the F2 here and the A sharp 2 here. So I hit apply. You can see that. Select that again and apply. That's changing all the note lengths except for the root notes. Now, what if I want to change the position? Well, if I want to do that, I can just add another field here, select position, and then for the operation, I can set relative random values between. And here I can just set an amount. So let's say we say -5. I don't want it to be a big jump. I just want some subtle movement changes between the positions of the notes just to give some sort of randomization to it. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to select that events again, just make sure they've got it selected and hit apply. And now watch as it's randomly moving the positions around except for the root notes of the chord. I could go a bit more drastic here. So for example, maybe let's go -20 and 20 here. So just jumping it up a bit. Now take a look as we apply that. Can you see how those positions are jumping around? So this is a great way if you just want to add some variance to your MIDI performance. Maybe you've input in your MIDI data or you've recorded it in and then you've hard quantized it and you've changed the note lengths to specific note lengths. Using something like this can just help add in some randomization to performance. For example, imagine randomizing some of the velocities, then randomizing some of the lengths and the position. It's just going to slightly alter your performance and maybe give it a bit more of a human feel to it. So that's how to work with note velocities, note lengths, and note positions. Now, you can also copy and extract CC data to other CC lanes, and that's what I'm going to show you in this video using the logical editor. So for example, on this track, I've got an orchestral track that's playing some chords that has some modulation on CC1. So as you can see, here's the modulation, here are the chords, and that's on CC1. So if I play that back, you've got that string section playing through, and there's been this modulation that I've also recorded in from the mod wheel. But what if I want to extract the data on CC1 to CC11, which is the expression? Well, that's pretty easy to do with the logical editor. So I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to show you what fields I'm going to add. So I'm going to click Insert here. The type is going to be equal to a controller. So we're working with controllers. Then I'm going to add another lane. And for this, I want to change it to value 1 because value 1 is going to look at the controller number. So if I go to value 1, this is going to be equal to a CC value. And I want to change the CC to CC1. So it's looking at the modulation. And then for the actions, for this, I want value 1, which is CC1. I want it to be set to a fixed value, meaning it's going to take the exact same values from value 1 and then transform them to another CC. So if I type CC11 here, it's going to detect that it's the expression. So basically what we're saying is a controller with the controller number of CC1 it's going to take its value, which is set and fixed, and transform it to CC11. So watch this. I've got this orchestral events over here selected that has the modulation on CC1. And I hit apply. It disappears because it's extracted it from CC1. And if I click down here, I can see all my other CC lanes. And down here, you can see I've now got data on CC11. And that is the modulation data that's been copied across from CC1 to CC11. Now, if you had assigned this to a key command, you could quickly do this. So maybe using a lot of instruments where you're recording in the modulation, but you want to quickly convert it to another CC lane, for example, like CC11, then you can use this preset that's been built up, assign it to a key command, and quickly do that. So that's giving you an idea of some more things that you can do with the MIDI side of things and events with the logical editor. Now let's check out some other things in the next video. In this video, I want to show you how you can use the logical editor to select different portions of data within a range within your selection. So what I mean by this is, let's say, for example, I go into this drum part over here and I wanted to remove all the note data that was just before the bar. I'd have to sort of drag and go like this and just go through each of them and sort of select the notes and delete them. And that is quite time consuming. Now, you can do this way more efficiently with the logical editor. Let me show you how it's done. So I'm going to open it up and I'm just going to remove any fields that we got here and just start from scratch. So I'm going to insert a line over here. And for this, the type is going to be equal to a note. That's perfectly fine. We're going to leave that. Then we're going to add in another field. And for this, we want to choose position. So we want to choose the position that we want to select. And what you got here is you've got equal to, and you've got equal to a specific PPQ reading, which is a bar. Now I want to click over here and choose a different option. As you can see, you've got quite a selection of different things, but what we're going to be focusing in on is this inside a bar range. Now, what it does now is it's got no settings here for the parameters, but as I drag here, it changes these parameters. Now, basically, the best way of thinking about this is if you just take a look here, this is your bar. So you've got a beat, another beat here, another beat here, and then another beat here, and then the subdivisions within that beat. So if I wanted to select everything that was, for example, at the end of the bar, or maybe just a selection just before the end of the bar, I can, for example, make a selection. I'm just going to drag here to make that selection over there. Then I don't need to add anything over here. All I need to do is change the action list to select. So just make sure I've got my MIDI event selected and I'm going to hit apply. What you'll notice there is if I zoom up, it's done exactly that. It's selected my MIDI note data just before the end of the bar. And then I can hit the delete key and I've deleted all of that. So that really does save a lot of time in having to go through and edit the MIDI note data. So let me just do that quickly again. So I'm going to just move this up here so you can see this. And I'm just going to draw in a different selection now. So let's say I want the MIDI note data that's in the middle, but leaving what's in the beginning and the end of the bar. Then I'm going to make sure that I've got the event selected. I'm going to hit apply, selects all that note data. Then I hit delete and it deletes it for me. So it's a very easy way to make specific selections within a range that it selects after you apply it, and then you can delete that note data or copy it or do whatever you want. And you've also got other options, for example, like inside and outside bar ranges and the range. So definitely try to test some of these out, especially when you're going in and selecting MIDI note data that's quite tedious and can take up a lot of time. Use something like this to help you select the note data that you want, and then copy and delete or do whatever you want with it. So that covers it for the logical edit presets. There's just one more thing I want to talk about, and that's the pre and post commands that's in the project logical editor. Let's take a look at that next. Now in this video, I just want to jump back to the project logical editor and show you the pre and post commands that you can use. So first off, I've got a project here where I've got a selection of MIDI tracks that are empty and are not being used. If I wanted to remove and disable these tracks, I'd have to select each one of them. So for example, select that, select that, select that, select that, and so on. So those are the empty tracks. And then right click on them disable them, and change their visibility by going to the visibility area and ticking those. Now, I want to show you an easy way of doing that. So I'm going to open up the Project Logical Editor. And as you can see here, you've got your filters, your actions, and then these pre and post commands. And you've got 4 slots that you can add on either the pre or the post. As you can see by the name, this processes these commands before what's happening over here, and this is after. And if you just click on the plus sign, you can see the different types of commands that you can add. For example, maybe before doing any of this, you want to add a specific type of track, or maybe, for example, you want to go to the audio, you want to adjust the fades to the range before it applies any of the filters, and so on. So these are just broken down to different types of subcategories, and then you can click on them to reveal what it is and choose one of these options. Now, first, let's go through what we need to do for the filters and then the actions. And for this, I'm going to use the post-process commands. So starting off at the top here, we need to insert a media type. The media type is going to equal a MIDI track. So we're going to select MIDI there. Then we're going to add another field. And for this MIDI, the container type is going to be a track. And then for this container type, the property, we need to set this. So we're going to have property. We have the property is set, and it's going to be set to is empty. So if I hit apply right now, you'll see that it selects the MIDI tracks that are empty. But let's take this a step further. So I'm just going to unselect that, and I'm going to go down over here to the post command. So we don't need to do an action because all I want to do is select them and then add the post process commands. So first off, I want to disable the tracks that are selected. So we're going to go over here and we're going to go down to audio and then down to disable enable track. And then for the second track, this is where I want to take those tracks that are disabled and change their visibility. So this is under the channel and track visibility. And what we want is hide selected tracks. So any tracks that are selected are going to be hidden. So I'm going to select that. So this is what we've got set up so far. We've got a media type is equal to a MIDI. Container is a MIDI track. And the property of that MIDI track is when those tracks are empty. So it's a track, but there's no events on it. And what's going to happen is those tracks that are selected are going to be disabled, and then the visibility is going to be hidden. So watch this. Just take a look over here. Maybe I'll just move this a bit to the side and watch as I hit apply. You see what happened there? It might be a bit quick, but if I go back here and reveal the visibility, so I'm just going to say show all tracks, you'll see those MIDI tracks that were empty were disabled and then hidden. So I'm just going to do it one more time. I'm just going to right click on these and say enable selected tracks. So we're back to what we were, just select something else and watch this. Watch how quick this is. That was super quick. So as you can see, we've got a filter that's happening, and that filter is selecting the tracks, and then we are disabling them and then hiding them. Probably what I should have mentioned is that for the filter condition, I did choose select. So we're not transforming. So just make sure that that's set to select so that we can run this process. But as you can see, having this added pre-process and post-process commands, you can take the logical editor presets that you've set up and take them a step further. So I hope that gives you a very good understanding now on the Project Logical Editor, the Logical Editor, and now the pre and post commands. Now, next up, let's take a look at how we can use macros to take multiple logical presets and apply them in one go with a macro. Now, one more thing that I want to show you is how you can incorporate your logical editor presets into macros, meaning you can create one macro that applies multiple logical editor presets in one go. So that's taking the efficiency and workflow of one preset and bundling it together with many. Let me show you how this is done. So if you go to the edit menu and then down to key commands, and to show your macros, just click this button over here to show macros. And then you create a new macro. I'm just going to give it a name, Gary Logical Editor Presets. Can really be any name, but that'll do for now. So that's going to be the new preset. And now we need to add commands into it. Now, I just need to scroll down to the folder that says process. So I'm just going to scroll down and here we go. Process logical presets. Now, all your logical presets that you've designed or the factory included ones are going to be listed here. The only disadvantage is that they're in alphabetical order, starting with the numerical things through to the alphabetical order. So it's just not categorized into different folders. So you just need to find the one that you're looking for. So let's just start at the top. How about starting off with -20 velocity for notes not on the beat? So I'm going to add that command. You can see that it's added into that macro over there. Next, let's go for change major chords to minor chords. So I'm going to click on that and add that. Just going for some random things over here just to show you how this works. And then next, I want to increase the length of notes. So let's go to increase length, and I'm going to say increase length by 10 ticks and just add that. So here what we've got is we've got 3 logical presets bundled into one macro, and the macro is called Gary Logical Editor Preset. So I'm going to click OK. Now just keep an eye on this MIDI note data over here. So just make sure that we've got our MIDI note selected. Then I'm going to go to Edit and then Macros. And then under Macros here, you can see the macro that I created. Now watch what happens when I select that. Boom, there we go. So there were 3 logical edits presets that were run in one go there. So basically, we took the velocities down of notes that were not on the beat. We changed the thirds of chords to minor chords, and then also we changed the length. So to make this even more efficient, you could assign that to a key command. So I'm going to go to key commands, then down to my macros. So let's just scroll down to macros over here. Here are the macros that I created, and let's assign a key command to this. For this, I'm going to hit Control, Shift, and Q, and just assign that. It can be really anything, but that should do. So if we just zoom in over here, and I hit Control, Shift, Q, each time I do that, you can see how it's running those logical presets. Let me just do that again. So we'll go back from scratch. So there we go, and I'll run that again. One time, it's going to do that. So there you go. 3 logical presets run in one go with a macro set to a key command. Now, obviously, if you build up your own logical edits presets, you can get way more bang for your buck now by taking those and bundling them together into a macro. So that sums it up for this video series and the logical editors. I hope that you've seen how these can really help your workflow and be more efficient in how you work in your projects. So I'd highly recommend you going in there, testing out the presets that are already included, editing those, and then start thinking of ways on how you can build up your own presets. And also, if you like this video series, definitely check out some of the other Cubase video series on Groove 3.